Welcome back to part 7 of building the Prometheus. What we have here is the model deconstructed. I've had to do some work, mainly on these engine pods. There's an exhaust system on each of these units. It's almost like a vent-like detail that I'm trying to replicate, and I'm doing this with milliput. Not only is milliput an item or a medium that you can fill in with, you can actually sculpt with it as well. So if you look carefully, you can see the slats that I put in as the details progressing. Let's try and get this to focus. There we go. So you can see the effect there. So this has been roughly put in, and I'm going to finesse that. So as I was saying, not only is milliput a good medium for filling in, it's an excellent sculpting medium as well. You'd be surprised how much you can actually get out of it as a sculpting medium. So that's that. What I've also done is built up these walls some more as well on the side of the fuselage. Just clip that together. So here, that's been built up. This has to come down a little bit, so I'll have to sand this down so it's flush, and the same on this side, so it won't have this gaping hole in the middle of the fuselage. So I'll build that up as well. And here I've extended the part that connects to the command module, the bridge and the flight deck, so there isn't a cavity between the neck and the main body. Just let me grab this a minute. Demonstrate. It's difficult to do this on camera, but yeah, you can roughly see the gap is hugely reduced. It'll look better once I've tidied it up. So excuse everything being out of focus. Yes, so the next part is to tidy up these individual pieces so everything can go back together and be nice and flush, to be made beautiful and perfect, well, as perfect as I can possibly make it. And then we'll away. One thing I've got to say before I progress. Now, these engine pods, they definitely have slats or intakes or exhausts, and these slats or flaps close when they're in space in flight, and then they open when they're flying in the atmosphere. I plan to have mine half open so they'll be in between, so I'll make these out of styrene. So what I'm doing here is just drawing out the general shape, or mapping out the general shape, so when I cut the individual pieces of styrene they'll be able to go in, and that will be perfect. I've already got a bed of styrene laid in there, inlaid in this cavity, so that any subsequent pieces of styrene, just use styrene glue and that's it, job done. I don't have to wait for the double epoxy or the araldite to cure in that respect. It's pretty much instant, which is great. Now this, I said I wasn't going to use it. I said I was going to use it, then I wasn't going to use it. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, because the polyurethane or the polystyrene equivalent I ordered is far too big. So what I might do is measure this again and order another substitute online. So we'll be back in a little while. Welcome back. This is part 7 of building the Prometheus. Hello everyone everywhere. This is, as I said, part 7 of building the Prometheus. It's not a Star Trek video, although those will be in the offing at some point. What we have here is the USS Equinox from Starcraft Models. It's a polyurethane model kit, and when I first had this kit, the sensor panel, which we are focused in on here, was just vaguely detailed. It wasn't very accurate at all. So I took it upon myself to study the CGI model and hollow out those panels there and insert stock styrene, which I then detailed on top of, to make, as I said, the model kit more accurate to the CGI representation. You may ask yourself, well, what's this got to do with the Prometheus? Well, I will show you. Right, I'll move you out of the way a minute. Equinox, we'll just pop you there. Okie dokie. So this is the engine pod, which everyone is now very familiar with. Looking at the section of the cowling, you can see where I've drawn an area in pencil. Well, that inner area is going to be hollowed out. It's the same principle as the Equinox, where that particular detail has conduits, panels, you name it in there. It's a very, very tiny area to detail, but my reasoning is, well, if I can do it on the Equinox, which is not much bigger than this tiny section, I can apply the same method to the Prometheus. So let's move over here. What we have here are 8 styrene cutouts. These are going to be layered in the cavities that I'm going to create. So let's get that in focus. There we go. So you might call this part destroying the Prometheus, because well, that's what I'll be basically doing. I will be doing a lot of destructive work and then detailing it with stock styrene and perhaps some brass tubing. If you look at this section here, this is let's show you. This is the boom, basically, or you might say the Prometheus is equivalent to, a pylon. But this is what the engines are suspended by and articulated by in flight or landing mode. But here you can see that the detail is just very vague, actually, and it's not at all like Ben Proctor's
CGI renderings. So what we'll do here is hollow that, get tongue-tied, excuse me, hollow all of that out with a Dremel, and then do the same as with the USS Equinox and the engine pod. So we'll drill out these sections and then we'll detail them with styrene and perhaps some brass tubing, so it's more authentic to its CGI representation on screen. If you remember, in one of the previous episodes we talked about the same on this area here, because this is not accurate at all. So all this is going to be drilled out, and this once the two halves of the fuselage, the hull, are glued together, then we will detail this section thoroughly using more or less the same principle. So that will look really good. Also, in the last part, I had putty curing along the fuselage. I've had to build this section up because when the two halves are together, there's still some significant gaps. There are still some gaps, even though the two halves have been pressed together. They're not going to be filled in thoroughly until the model is basically one piece. So we're not going to traumatize ourselves about that too much in terms of making progress. She is taking longer. Well, I've had so much in between, but she is taking longer than perhaps I imagined, because I was making such progress earlier on, such really good progress. So it's a matter of picking up the slack and ploughing on with things. So if I can just, oops, where are we? So if I just click on that, we're not focused yet, but we will be, just bear with. So where are we? We are looking, focus. So this section of the Prometheus, this is what we're looking at. So as you can see in that tiny section there, there's the conduit piping I was telling you about and the control panels. So all in that tiny section just above the compound surface of the engine module. Also, I've got to put in the vents, as I was referring to them last time. So they're going to be in semi-flight configuration, so they're going to be semi-open. And also on top of the compound surface, there's, actually that's just above this section here. Well, actually, I'll just show you on the model, it'd be better, wouldn't it? Right, trying to show you some 3 dimensions. Right, so we're talking about this section, and I've attempted it several times and I've not really had that much success. So this section has vents or venting details along each side, and I've tried sculpting it in milliputs. I have tried plastic, styrene. Styrene works very well when it's, you have a decent surface to apply it to, but these sections here are a little bit difficult. But I have found some styrene stock which is really paper thin, so I'm rather hoping that I'll be able to cut it out sparingly and then apply it to this compound surface here, which I've built up on top of the original model, so we can get that detail where we want it to be in terms of authenticity. It's not an easy ride, these engines, and I certainly wasn't expecting to spend so much time on them, but there's so much detail that I have to apply to them myself prior to applying the stock parts of the kits, so there's much more detail besides what comes with the original model kit. I'm not complaining, it's not a bad thing. As I said originally, it stretches you as a modeler, and it stretches me personally. So I'm quite happy to just plod on, but I feel sorry for you viewers in a way, because you're probably thinking, well, hasn't he finished this kit yet? These long absences. So I do sincerely apologise for that. But I'm going to sign off here in a minute, and it'll probably take me perhaps half an hour, 45 minutes to do what I need to do, and then I'll be back. But I'll probably be back in a couple of minutes. But relativity and all that. But anyway, I'll see you in just a tick. Okay, welcome back. As you can see, there's a slightly different arrangement, and as I said before, it's not a Star Trek review, but it does bear relevance, or these two starships bear relevance in terms of what I'm trying to present. If you remember, I was talking about the sensor pallets that I inserted on the USS Equinox. I have the USS Equinox's future counterpart, and that's the USS Rhode Island. I did the same thing with regards to detailing these sensor pallets and then inserting them with stock plastic into the cavities that I had drilled out with the Dremel. I detailed these panels, and the same thing I have done with Prometheus. So if I can just bring some of this into focus, you'll see what I'm referring to. So it's a very nice shot of the USS Equinox. These are the sensor pallets that I'm referring to. Try not to poke too enthusiastically with a sharp tool, because I don't want to damage the detail and the hard work that I've done on this particular kit. Let's turn her over. See all the detail I've added in here as well. Have to forgive me, I'm a bit bunged up. Asthma, hay fever, you name it. This is the USS Rhode Island. And there's a very nice shot of the sensor pallet array there. Port side and starboard. Unfortunately, the Rhode Island's had a bit of an accident, so I'm going to have to brush up on her at some point. You can imagine my absolute wailing of despair when this happened. I think it was a couple of bottles of paint that actually dropped on top of her, which resulted in the paintwork being severely damaged. So I'm not going to redo the whole ship. I'm just going to try and do these piles if possible, but that's not really relevant. What we want to get back to is the Prometheus. And if the light doesn't wash this out too much, you can see the detail that I've inserted in these panels, these panel areas that I've hollowed out. Ironically, these parts are not as intricate as those on either of the Starfleet vessels, but just as fidgety to actually implement and insert. It's a nice surprise for everyone. It's the venting that I was talking about. I've inserted that in with stock plastic. And the vent grills, again stock styrene plastic. Need to be refined, finessed, to make it look as though it's been something that's cast as opposed to something that's been applied. So this is what I'm going to show you on the engine pods until I finish them. There's so many parts to actually add to these units. They actually are going on and on and on and on forever. There doesn't seem to be the end in sight in terms of these, but we'll get there eventually. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take a break from the engine units, and I'm going to concentrate on Vickers pod. It comes in two halves. I'm going to glue magnets to the base, seal them inside the compartment, and then this will be detachable from the main Prometheus starship. These are the magnets that I'll be using. I won't hold those too close to the camera, otherwise we'll screw things up very severely. I'm also going to be gluing on the primary and secondary engine intakes to the main fuselage of the Prometheus. These supply additional power to the primary engine pods. Power is channeled through the pylons into the reactors, and the intakes there to help cool them down during atmospheric flight. Oops, let's get this into focus. The magnets will be inserted on the other side of this, so it's on the inside of the fuselage. And that will, oops, go on. That'll keep the EV in place. Okay, we'll be right back. Quickly, just to quickly show you that I've got the magnets in place. This is on the inside of the EV. On the flip side, got two more magnets in place there to hold the magnets on the inside in situ, so that when these come off, magnets on the inside of the Prometheus's fuselage will then connect to these magnets in here. And the top of this goes on, I was going to say like so, but obviously not like so. Like so. And just pop on, pop off. Don't want it dropping off, smashing, cracking, or damaging the paintwork. So it'll be quite a secure belt and braces job. These magnets are really, really powerful. Really, really do the job. Yeah. There we go. Right, we're back. Back in a bit. The magnets are now in place. Unfortunately, I can't give you an effective demonstration of the EEV being in situ because that would just pull everything apart. Everything's still curing, so it's going to require at least another 24 hours before everything is set. But it'll be worth waiting. It'll be worth that amount of time. The only thing that troubles me really is that the EEV is such a poor fit anyway. It's going to need some on the surface resculpting so that it rests in its cradle, but we'll see how that goes. One thing I've just realised as well, where the magnets have now been in place, is a critical junction where the wiring for the electronics go through, so I'm rather hoping I can insulate the wiring enough so that the current isn't disrupted when I'm trying to run the circuit. Actually, the circuit board is going to have to be placed in a significantly far away part in the structure of the vessel so that the magnets do not disrupt the circuit board, because that's what will happen if we're not careful. So that's going to require some ingenuity, so we'll tackle that later on down the road. So this is a nice pleasant change from working on the engine pods, which, as I said, seem to be taking forever, but again, it'll be worthwhile. It's just a dogged slog at the moment. I'm knocking the camera. Also, the primary and secondary engine intake manifolds are in place, so we've got starboard and port side. They're in place, they're curing nicely. I've used a combination of araldite and super glue. Super glue just to tack things in place, a bit like spot welding, while the araldite is curing, so the araldite will be cured probably within 24 hours, while the super glue just hold things nicely in place for me until that time is done. So yeah, looking good, looking good. That's quite a leap forward considering how slowly things have ground down. I'm hoping to really pick up the pace. Just crack on, crack on, crack on. Yeah. Get this girl built. Get her painted before the summer's out. But yeah, looking good. Hang on, what's this? What's this? Wait a doggone minute. This isn't the Prometheus. This isn't the Prometheus at all. Actually, it is the Prometheus, but not as we know it, Captain. Yeah, I couldn't resist that. This is my Starcraft's Prometheus. Another ship with style. another vessel equally difficult in many ways to actually realise, although being a Starcraft model, she was basically one kit anyway. Well, she's actually 3 kits in one, and can separate into 3, and this one can separate into 3. But this was difficult to paint. As you can see, the Toltec design is really quite something to behold. It's really quite impressive. It took a lot of time to actually try and study, digest and apply all the Toltec markings, because the Prometheus, the USS Prometheus in Voyager, is not Aztec, it's Toltec. And if you look at the design, there's an awful lot of Nazca details in that. But yeah, I did say this wasn't a Star Trek presentation or a Star Trek model presentation, but I couldn't resist showing the Prometheus's namesake, or other starships' namesake. The Prometheus from Voyager is so cool, unbelievably cool. Took a long time to actually realise and paint this kit. I actually had a bit of a boo-boo. I applied some lacquer and dissolved the paintwork. Oh god, that was a nightmare. But I rescued most of it. Yeah, well, the top side of it, the underside was totally shot. I had to repaint the underside, but we came through. We came through it all right. Well, let's see if we can get a wider shot. No, out of focus. Not quite the Wayland Prometheus signing off, but the USS Prometheus and the Wayland Prometheus signing off until Part 8. Bye for now.